Half of all restaurants and maybe 99% of all pizza places are fronts for money laundering and crime of sorts, especially specifically drug smuggling and more specifically marijuana. And this is Doomed Planet, episode 27, Pizza Shop Pot Smuggler. People in Seattle were rich as shit long before Microsoft and Amazon pumped untold riches into an already thriving economy. And this is the milieu in which David Mendoza grew up. He grew up in the Madison Park neighborhood of Seattle, sort of a richy rich, old money neighborhood. And not only that, but he grew up in the Broadmoor community. It's a gated community with a golf course.
Broadmoor. Within the city of Seattle sits a walled-off community shrouded in mystery. Only the very elite can gain entrance through the heavily guarded gate.
And eerily enough, back when I was a pizza delivery boy in Seattle in the old days, I would often go to Broadmoor, and then the guard would have to check me at the gate and whatnot. And David went on to become a prolific drug smuggler, and he's a very productive person when not imprisoned, and he led a very interesting life. So we'll talk about it here a bit. And thanks to the Seattle Times and The Stranger, we're going to crib some of their reporting on this. The pizza connection is that David Mendoza owned Pazzo's Pizza on Eastlake, and that restaurant exists to this day. And he also owned a construction company and a theater in Bend, Oregon. And he was an on-again, off-again drug smuggler. One of the reasons he got in so much trouble for his conspiracy to smuggle marijuana from Canada into the U.S. was that he has a background in drug smuggling. Drugs should be legal, and the best criminals never get caught. So, David was convicted of conspiring to import hashish and distributing cocaine and hashish in 1993 in Seattle. And all the way back in 1990, when he would have just been out of the University of Washington, he was convicted of cocaine possession. One of David's co-defendants was someone that worked for his Seattle construction company. It was called ETA Construction. Apparently it was a joke because David was always late for things. That defendant was Danny Zylstra. He was accused of delivering 400 pounds of marijuana to Seattle's Seward Park neighborhood, and that would be very, very close to where the Doomed Planet podcast is based. So not the typical drug trafficker, David Mendoza. He was class president at Garfield High School. You might know that Quincy Jones went to Garfield, and he eventually donated money so they could build, I think, a music hall. So it's a very well-respected high school, and if you're a Seattle rich kid and you want to not be in the foofiest, fussiest private school, you would go to Garfield. Then he went to the University of Washington. He was class president at Garfield. Then he went to the University of Washington and graduated. So not the typical low-life stereotype drug psycho that the media would portray. But you know what? He's addicted to the thrills. I mean, he's got a pizza place and a theater and a construction company. These things were profitable. He didn't need to do this drug stuff, but, dropping weed from a helicopter, rushing over the Canadian border and having your buddies pick it up, that is a thrill, especially when you get to sell that marijuana and make lots of money. That is tax-free money. And again, drugs should be legal. Tax evasion, not so much. In September 2005, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents saw Michael and two other people at the scene of a 500-pound drop in the Okanagan National Forest in eastern Washington. Again, he was fled to Spain. He was extradited and appeared in federal court in 2009. Thanks to Gene Johnson of the Seattle Times for getting us warmed up here with his coverage. For immediate release, November 19th, 2009, the United States Attorney's Office, Western District of Washington. Drug trafficker sentenced to 14 years in prison for BC bud importation conspiracy. Marijuana enthusiasts would know that BC bud, at least before pot was legal in Washington, was a much desired strain that was grown in Canada and came down this-a-ways. Seattle native fled to Spain during investigation of conspiracy to import more than 1,000 kilos of BC bud. David R. Mendoza, 44, formerly of Bellevue, Washington, was sentenced today in U.S. District Court to 14 years in prison and 5 years of supervised release. When Mendoza pleaded guilty June 19, 2009, both sides agreed to the 14-year prison sentence. Mendoza agreed to forfeit 4 properties to the government. The government loves to steal your property when you have been convicted of a crime, or even before then, in many cases. District Judge Thomas S. Zilli told Mendoza, "You truly did have all the opportunities in the world. President of Garfield High School. You got a degree. And then you got involved in drugs. It's tragic. You don't have anybody to blame but yourself." Now, again, we're talking about marijuana, which is now legal. And this sanctimonious judge is locking this guy up for 14 years. Well, the U.S. attorneys love to send out these gloating press releases. The first indictment in this case was returned December 2006. Indictment was unsealed in January 2007 after Mendoza was located in Spain. He was identified as the leader of a conspiracy to smuggle multiple 100-kilo loads of BC bud into the U.S. by commercial trucks and helicopter. God, if I took in a 100-kilo load of BC bud in the 90s and sold it, that would be it. I'd retire. But no, again, you're addicted to the thrill. And once a drug dealer, always a drug dealer, as they say. So, yeah, there was the stunt with the helicopter. Mendoza admits he's responsible for the distribution of thousands of pounds of marijuana. He has 2 prior convictions, which always hurts. In the government sentencing memo, prosecutors note that Mendoza has been involved in the drug trade for more than 2 decades. He is a man of talent, intelligence, and great charm. Unfortunately, he has spent the past 20 years of his life committing crimes, smuggling drugs, and moving money through semi-phony businesses. Dude, Pazzo's Pizza has damn good pizza. It's not a phony business, and it would make a profit regardless of the drug smuggling of this gentleman. Most disturbingly, I love the language of the U.S. attorneys. So disturbing that you're smuggling a harmless drug and then evading taxes, which really is the only crime I can see here. He has regularly used his aging parents to move money for him. Assistant U.S. Attorney Susan M. Rowe and Roger Rogoff wrote in their sentencing memo. As part of the plea agreement, the government is going to take his stuff. Mendoza is forfeiting properties he owns in Bellevue, Tacoma, and Deer Park, Washington, as well as a movie theater in Bend, Oregon. Mendoza admits these properties were purchased with the proceeds of the drug conspiracy. Today's prison sentence is a reminder of the serious consequences drug traffickers face for trying to bring illicit drugs into our communities, said Lee Winchell, special agent in charge of the ICE Office of Investigations in Seattle. ICE remains committed to dismantling the international drug trade while ensuring that those who are involved don't benefit financially. And of course, ICE has been a big success on all fronts, especially with keeping drugs out of our country. He had ICE on his tail, and he got busted, and he's going to be in prison, which is Not a good place. You don't discuss where you graduated from college when you're in prison. But you could tell some wild stories about drug smuggling from helicopters that could give you some cred. Mendoza also speaks fluent Spanish that could help in prison as well. Everybody loves drugs and also pizza. That's why pizza places, as I said, are used to launder drug money. Patso's Pizza, again, we're in a pandemic and restaurants have been wiped out, so we're not sure if they're going to survive, but they are online and, they have the typical Italian American stuff. Here's a good one. Dave's Greenery Salad, which would obviously be an homage to the founder of Patso's, David Mendoza, and his greenery. That would be romaine lettuce tossed in our signature feta, rosemary, and garlic dressing and topped with Roma tomatoes, red onions, Parmesan cheese, and house-made croutons. That sounds delicious, although Roma tomatoes are shit. Even the best ones that Charlie's, the produce distributor, can get are shit. You can't get a good fucking tomato in Seattle unless you are a billionaire. But boy, I want to go to Patso's and I want a Dave's Greenery Salad. I want to support that concept. So drugs, I'm all for that. Violence, not for that. This is from the Seattle PI. 2009, drug-dealing businessman tied to motorcycle gang. Okay, I sense violence. Between his stint in federal prison and his recent forced return from Spain, Seattle native David Mendoza made quite a life for himself. He ran a pizza place. He owned a $455,000 three-bedroom house in Bellevue. Can't even get a chicken shack for that in Bellevue these days. He's smuggling several 220-pound loads of Canadian marijuana. After he got arrested, his father, Albert Emmanuel, told the Associated Press, "We just don't know what the devil's going on. We don't know that he's done anything. The only thing I can say is he's a very caring, nonviolent person, and anyone who knows him will testify to that." And then it's revealed that during an earlier prison stint, that's where he met some of his crime buddies with whom he was accused of the marijuana conspiracy charges. So, prison is crime college, literally. One of Mendoza's co-defendants was Philip Greiner, who is then 70 years old. He's accused of helping Mendoza send $150,000 to Mexico. So some money laundering or drug buying. Greiner was serving a cocaine distribution sentence at Sheridan when Mendoza arrived. His attorneys say he was doing a favor for a friend by taking the money to Mexico. Danny Zylstra, as we mentioned, worked at Mendoza's construction company, and he was caught unloading marijuana from a helicopter. Several hockey bags full. Hockey bags were commonly used to smuggle the BC bud because it's like a Canada thing. And William Renner, age 56, attempted to bribe a witness in the murder of Donald Jessup, a Ravensdale man killed by Ghost Riders gang member Nazi John Price in 2004. So here we have Mendoza. Pot should be legal. It's all good and everything. It doesn't kill anyone, but you got some bikers involved in your schemes. That's a mistake that I think the prosecutors frowned upon. Nazi John killed Don Jessup. His body was never found. So Renner and Greiner, the co-conspirators, received, quote, relatively minor sentences after pleading guilty. Mendoza faced hard time, which he was sentenced to. Now we're going to look at a great feature by Brendan Kiley of The Stranger, April 23rd, 2014. double-crossed by the Department of Justice. 5 years ago, the DOJ screwed over a pot dealer in a case that's now undermining America's ability to extradite other international fugitives. So David Mendoza shaking things up internationally. David Mendoza first realized something was off in the summer of 2006 when he was rear-ended by a U.S. mail truck. He'd been driving to Portland, heading south toward Bend, where his construction company was restoring the Liberty Movie Palace, which he had purchased. His bumper flew off, and he saw a device with batteries and a wire, and he took it to a Chevy dealership. And the guy said, quote, "Dude, this is not good. That looks like a GPS device." And then he showed the device to his attorney, and sure enough, they checked their vehicles, and they're all being tracked with these devices. According to Kiley, in reality, the heat had been on for at least 3 years. In April of 2003, according to court documents later submitted by the Office of U.S. Attorney Jenny Durkan,
Hi, I'm Jenny Durkan. I'm running for mayor because I love Seattle.
Who is now mayor of Seattle, Customs seized 400 pounds of Mendoza's marijuana hidden in a load of lumber on a semi crossing the border. And almost a year prior to him discovering the wires, quote, an unusual couple had moved in across the street from Mendoza's house. He remembers that the man and woman would take 12-hour shifts at the house. Like the guy would go, show up for 12 hours, then leave, and the woman would come, and it was just unusual behavior for anyone, and obviously some narcs there. And again, cops, even at the detective level, ain't too fucking smart. So at one point, Mendoza goes to a sushi place in Seattle, and he sees his two suspicious neighbors eating at the sushi place. And he suspected they were FBI agents. And again, that's if there's a more despicable, satanic organization on this planet other than the Republican Party or the Democratic Party at this point, for that matter, it would be the FBI. Also not the brightest bunch. And then he's an ex-girlfriend tells him she's been called before a grand jury, and then a friend who he hadn't seen in years finds him out of the blue and starts asking him suspicious questions. So David Mendoza has a right to be paranoid at this point, and he knows damn well that they're on to him, and he plans to go to Mexico and then to Spain for good. So he wants to do his time in a Spanish prison because he'll be closer to relatives in Spain. Quite honestly, well, Franco is not the leader anymore, but a Spanish prison is less of a hellhole than any spot in the United States, even a federal spot. And again, according to the stranger, he wanted also to be closer to his family. One of his children had Down syndrome, and the Spanish penal system allows much more family visitation and is just much more humane. There's a long-standing tradition in international law that allows prisoners to be extradited back to their home countries. And the stranger mentions a child predator and a terrorist insurgent that were granted these provisions, but not Mendoza, the drug smuggler. Mendoza started his smuggling career as a youth, going to Canada and then putting some weed in spare tires and stuff. And he and his co-conspirators graduated to, quote, walking dozens of pounds across the border in rucksacks, taking 3-hour hikes along logging roads in the middle of the night. And they had some experience with cocaine. Mendoza, quote, was the conduit between friends in Spain who could sell the stuff in bars and friends in America with delusions of grandeur. They aspired to become jet-setting cocaine smugglers. But according to a 1993 sentencing memorandum filed by Mendoza's defense attorney, Kate Flaumer, who would later become a U.S. attorney, Mendoza was a minor player in a group that was largely unsuccessful, both in acquiring a kilo of cocaine and exporting it. Let's see, they went to Florida in 1989 to buy a kilo, but their supplier took the money and disappeared. Later, Mendoza bought a kilo in Vegas, but it was busted by airport security. On the third try, Mendoza went to Florida and bought a kilo and brought it back to Seattle. One of his buddies was caught snorting some in an airport bathroom. Misadventures in the cocaine trade. At this point, maybe you shouldn't be a drug smuggler. And again, he starts with cocaine, then goes back down to the marijuana. Cocaine is a whole different world. That's where the butchery starts, and you see a lot of people, get the disputes are settled with murder, mass murder, in the case of thousands of people, of victims every year in Mexico. People in the drug trade that fuck up, and then they are murdered and often tortured and murdered. It's not that charming. Okay, so apparently Mendoza has a Spanish connection. Of course, he's importing hashish from Spain to Canada, and then they're lugging it across the border. And at a certain point, they're like, these hikes in the middle of the night where we can only carry as much as we can physically carry, we're done with that. Let's start putting these on some trucks like a normal drug smuggler would. Okay, in 2008, the Spanish National Court issued a ruling. Part of it was that Mendoza's sentence was going to be served in Spain. Quote, the court was explicit about this, adding, in this case, the American authorities have to agree as a condition of extradition. And apparently the ramifications of this are still being felt today because the U.S. attorneys double-crossed Spain. They refused to send him back. The authorities in the U.S. fucked him over. What a shocking surprise. And according to Kylie, neither Mendoza nor Spain can force the U.S. to return him, but the whole story is now a cautionary tale to European governments considering other extradition requests from the U.S. It will make other countries less likely to extradite. That's just common sense, said James Frush, an attorney who has cited Mendoza's case to defend his own clients against extradition.
And now, advertising from our sponsor.
Oh, give me more of that. Give me more.
For only $15.95, the new barbecue meat lovers pizza.
Give me
More beef, ham, cabanossi, bacon, and pepperoni. And all with our special tangy barbecue sauce. Save up to $10 on a family-sized pizza. More great value from Pizza Hut.
Please, 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 Pizza Hut, please.
Dine in, takeaway, and free delivery.
Here's some irony. This is a different David Mendoza, but in 2016, a cannabis retail shop called Vela hosted a series of free events that included David as a speaker, also city attorney Pete Holmes, and the director, and Rick Garza, director of the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, to discuss legislative solutions to support the legal market. Cannabis, and again, the marijuana is now legal, and a senior policy advisor for the mayor, David Mendoza, not the same David Mendoza, is working on that policy that only a few years back they were all throwing people in jail for.
The only way to catch a doper is when you yourself become a smoker.
Hats off to City Attorney Pete Holmes, who actively campaigned to get Washington State Initiative 502 passed, and that legalized recreational marijuana in our great state. Yeah, but if you're going to do the marijuana, do it our way, because state power will crush you. And here we have 2014, Seattle to crack down on pot delivery services. Delivery services, which are illegal, will get a single chance to stop operating, by Evan Bush, the Seattle Times. David Mendoza, a policy advisor to Mayor Ed Murray, said in a city council briefing Wednesday that the mayor's office will work with Seattle police on operations against these delivery services. There was a golden age of pot delivery services in Seattle, and this was during the, quote, medical, unquote, era. Recreational was still not legal, and people were making a fortune. And some of the medical dispensaries were just fronts for massive delivery services. And I had the opportunity to do that, and but again, no one ever was prosecuted for this, and fortunes were made. Again, not the same David Mendoza. He was a policy advisor to Mayor Ed Murray, who is accused of horrible sex crimes, if I'm not mistaken, and had to resign. God, the Ed Murray story is going to be a 12-part series, but I almost don't want to go there. We already did the Frugal Gourmet, and that's enough like child molestation for this podcast for another year.
I don't know who this person is, so I'm kind of like in a tough situation. I'm waiting to find out more information, and when I find out more information, I'll absolutely tell the public what's going on here.
And with the filing of these documents late Tuesday night, the mayor doesn't have to wait any longer. The name of his accuser is Delvin Heckard, and his attorneys say he is not a pawn in a conspiracy, as alleged by Mr. Murray.
The good news for David Mendoza is that after rotting away for a while in the U.S. prison system, he is eventually extradited to Spain. U.S. allows drug trafficker to serve jail term in Spain after 6-year legal battle. The decision comes after the Spanish Supreme Court pressured the Prime Minister to resolve the diplomatic dispute. David Mendoza, who is being held in a New Jersey prison, was granted a prisoner transfer request, according to court papers filed Thursday in U.S. federal court. The announcement came just days after the Spanish Supreme Court called on the government of Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy to intensify its pressure on Washington to allow Mendoza to serve out his term close to his family in the Basque Country. So sociopath, psychopath, and very rich one-percenter Jenny Durkan, the current mayor of Seattle, was involved in taking down David Mendoza because marijuana, oh, it's so bad.
Seattle is a fearless, compassionate city.
Today is May 24th, 2020. Only a few days ago, Jenny sent the Seattle police to bust up some homeless encampments. And so the police came on a cold and rainy morning, and they told everyone to get the fuck out and grab what you can take. And then they threw all their stuff, their tents and belongings, into a garbage truck.
We can make Seattle more just and equitable. We can solve the problems we face, like affordability, homelessness, police reform.
And so that, as my friends at the Seattle Sucks podcast would say, is just an expression of state power and of state violence inflicted through the police. Sadly, many of the police were not wearing masks. And they said some of the younger, buffer-looking cops, the ones that work out and pride themselves on that, were wearing masks. But the older Trump chuds, redneck-type cops, and there are a lot of those, were not. And I do hope that people that do not wear masks as a political statement all die.
Deep tight, Marshal?
Nope.
Any last words?
Nope.
What do you want on your tombstone?
Pepperoni and cheese.
Time for Tombstone Pizza, made with the good stuff, real pepperoni, real cheese, so it's always real good. What do you want on your tombstone?
Just a little taste?
Nope.
Jenny Durkan is the daughter of a prominent Washington lobbyist. And we know what that means. You're trying to inflict the corporate point of view from your corporate clients onto the State House. Durkan's tenure at the Department of Justice was not unmarked by controversy, and her association with disgraced politicians like former Mayor Ed Murray, who resigned following several allegations of child molestation, have darkened her campaign trail. That's according to Heavy.com, that does a profile of Jenny, who was the first openly gay U.S. attorney appointed by Barack Obama. She did not call for Ed Murray, the child molester, to resign until the day he announced he was going to do so. So she stuck by him till the end.
Are you a child molester?
I'm not.
Her lobbyist father, Martin Durkan, worked with clients ranging from garbage haulers and optometrists to cigarette makers and horse racing outfits. So that's charming. Let's work for cigarette makers, and even the horse racing thing, that's a little sketch just because of the animal abuse that happens in that sad industry. Durkan wrote in a Medium article, "I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family, 8 kids. It was loud, lots of laughter, some arguing and a fair bit of fighting for what's yours. When I graduated from law school, my mother said, 'Finally, someone is going to pay you to argue.' I guess I've always had a bit of a fighting spirit." Jenny's partner, Dana Garvey, is extremely wealthy. They bought a $4 million house in 2015 and tore it down to build a 5,000 square foot, 5-bathroom McMansion worth $8 million today. On Durkan's financial disclosure forms, she put her net worth at $5.75 million, excluding that house. They are not legally married, and so Garvey does not have to disclose anything. She bought a home on Whidbey Island for $3.4 million. Durkan and Garvey have 2 sons. Garvey has a long career as just a money grubber who wants to start companies to get rich. Her LinkedIn profile has been deleted. She's very private. Credit records reveal she incorporated a company called Icon Analytics in 2015. She had a telecommunications project management firm in the early 90s with Durkan. So when you have this much money, it's almost gets despicable. I mean, what's the point of that? And if you're a public servant, who are you hanging around with, in the off hours? Is it like the people, the man on the street? Or is it other, gauche rich people?
We'll be right back after this message.
Chopping, gouging, slicing and stabbing, looting all the stores and everybody's grabbing. Politicians and the media telling their lies. Hey everybody, you need guillotine supplies. Torches, pitchforks, guillotine supplies. You'll find it at Chop Mart. Chop Mart, 1789 Skagsport Way South, Cedro Woolley, Washington, 98284. So thanks to Lester Black, fine reporter at The Stranger, the power couple running Seattle, January 30th, 2019. Mayor Jenny Durkan doesn't want to talk about her private life, which is too bad because it must be a hell of a story. Before becoming mayor of Seattle, she worked her way up in the legal profession. She was a corporate lawyer with clients like Coca-Cola. She said she would have been making $2 million a year if she hadn't become mayor and taken that pay cut. And her partner, according to The Stranger story, broke barriers in the world of high-stakes corporate business. She was a senior executive at McCaw Cellular / AT&T. Again, this is, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, but you might not know of the McCaw crime family. And we will deal with them on a future episode. So at this point, Garvey, from the stock options she would have received for this, is going to be not just rich or Jenny Durkan 5 million rich, but 50 or 100 million rich. They are easily one of Seattle's most powerful couples, if not the most powerful couple in the Pacific Northwest. I guess now that Jeff has divorced his wife, you could say that, but don't forget Bill and Melinda Gates and all the good they are doing for our society. And a note to conspiracy theorists, No, Bill Gates doesn't need to chip you to track you. You are already carrying a computer around with you everywhere you go that has a GPS, you idiots. On one of Durkan's financial disclosure forms, she has a checking account with more than $1 million in it, like all normal people, and stock in Costco and a company called Nanometrics. By all indications, Garvey is worth a lot of money. She's worked in high-paying corporate jobs. She owns her own companies, and she started her life with some change in the bank. Again, from the stranger, her father was a Louisiana telecom magnate who sold his wireless telecommunications firm for $400 million, according to an obituary in the Times-Picayune. So, yeah, they're hurting. And I know that they can empathize with so many of us in Seattle who have lost our jobs, and that $1,200 one-time payment from Cocaine Mitch has been spent, and now they can't pay their rent or their mortgage or buy food. I know Jenny and her partner, they feel for you. They feel for these people. They understand. They've been there.
Just in tonight, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan says that she wants to forego her salary. She says the last thing that she wants to do is furlough and lay off city employees.
I will forego my salary for the rest of the year. I want to set that example, and am working with, right now on how to do that. Unfortunately, in the city of Seattle, it looks like it's not possible. If it's not possible, I'm going to be donating that amount.
Seattle is looking at a $300 million tax revenue shortfall because of this pandemic.
And there you have it, the inspiring story of David Mendoza. He had all the opportunities in the world, but as these scoldy prosecutors would say, he blew it all so he could become a drug smuggler. You just wasted everything. But, he had a more interesting life than you fuckers. And yeah, once a drug dealer, always a drug dealer. The other rule for future drug dealers that you should mind very carefully, if you're fucking up on your earlier adventures, you just want to give up at that point and just run a pizza place without money laundering, without the weed. Just do something. But again, you're addicted to the thrills. I'm not sure if David is out of prison in Spain yet, but he's certainly in a more humane country right now. So in closing, I'm looking on Twitter today and I see no COVID concerns at the Lake of the Ozarks. And there's an aerial shot of hundreds and hundreds of white people crammed together in a swimming pool. And no masks, just unbelievable MAGA chud insanity. People are literally using this pandemic as a political statement. The dumbest, lowest information people among us, they're using this to say, yeah, we want our freedom. We're not going to wear no masks. And I hope all those fucking people, every single fucking one of them, dies a horrible death. This has been Doomed Planet, episode 27, Pizza Shop Pot Smuggler. Contact us at doomedplanetpod@gmail.com or see doomedplanet.com. Goodbye.
5, 6, 7, 8. Goodbye. This is the end of the song.